Hour after hour passed, and daylight began to dawn just as we came to a halt in a low, foggy place, so chilly that our teeth chattered, and our frames shook like leaves. The mists of morning were very heavy and settled over us like a pall. About 4 a.m. we formed in line of battle, but no foe was visible. The cold, clammy truth dawned on us that we were not far from the enemy, and we would soon lessen the distance. There we stood in the drizzle, all orders given in whispers, and although we knew we faced a dreadful battle, we were not sorry to hear the voice of Chanticleer, announcing the dawn of a new day. There was something terribly weird in this massing of troops at this time of day. In the hooting of owls as the dark figures of men moved through the pines, in the sobbing of the wind through the wet trees. The order to move to the attack wasn't half so disagreeable as one might think. In a moment, the whole force of men, not less than 20,000, sprang forward and a grand charge began. We have stormed no such formidable entrenchments ever before. The loss of life on our side would have been truly sickening, but for the fact that we caught them napping. The rebel pickets didn't stop to dispute our passage, but rushed pell-mell over the works. We gave them an all-wool yell and tore after them. It is said that this yell awakens men 2 miles away. Granting that noise is sometimes quite effective, there are times when silence is better, and this was a case of the latter. We would have lessened our danger if we had abstained from yelling. It was seemingly but a moment before the first line was in our possession. The rebels were now awake and had several lines and cross lines of works. Could we hold what we had? For a time, it seemed as if only a negative answer could be given. Here for 10 minutes, we never saw more terrible fighting, says one eyewitness. We had gained a foothold, and if not dislodged, we would soon be on Lee's flank. Every Confederate realized the desperate situation, and every Union soldier knew what was involved. For a time, every soldier was a fiend. The attack was fierce, the resistance fanatical. We captured one of their strongest entrenchments, but it was done in a tempest of iron and lead, in a rain of fire. We sought shelter from the storm behind stumps and trees, anything that offered a suggestion of safety. Many of those most in advance crouched on this side of the Confederate works, and when joined by others, moved over and made a feeble attempt to carry a second line. It was useless. The force of the blow was spent so far as Hancock's troops were concerned. If we held our own, we should do well. And we were soon tested in this regard, as Lee concentrated his forces with a view to hurling all he could spare against this spot to recapture it. We took 3,000 prisoners, 40 pieces of artillery, and 2 generals, Stuart and Johnson. 2 privates from our regiment captured Stuart and Johnson and immediately escorted them to General Hancock. Stuart had been a classmate of Hancock's at West Point, and when brought into his presence was quite crestfallen. Hancock, to relieve their embarrassment, stepped forward and extended his hand, saying, "How are you, Stuart?" Stuart declined the proffered hand, saying, "I am General Stuart of the Confederate Army, and under the circumstances I decline hand." Your Hancock replied, "Under any other circumstances, I should not have offered it." Matters soon became gloriously mixed, and it was impossible to find anything resembling organization. A few here, a few there, fighting under anything or anybody, or nobody, or not at all. The Provost Guard did all in their power to arrest stragglers and runaways, that is, within certain limits. They didn't dare get too near to risk their carcasses in such a melee. After a while, finding that there was no probability of any further organized attack, and not caring to continue in the desultory mess. Going on in front, I meandered up the hill to the Lendrom house and sought lodgings for the night in the shed. But I anticipate matters slightly, as there was much desperate fighting between the charge of the morning and the selection of lodgings in the afternoon. The rebels fought like devils, seeming to despise danger. Before 10 a.m., they made no less than 8 charges to retake the salient, showing the tremendous importance of the place. At one time, they came on flying our colors. We held them at every point and made them pay dearly for their attempts. We were held in a vice. We certainly couldn't advance. To retire was almost as difficult. We did all that any body of troops could do or would do under like conditions. We held our own, but to do this amounted to nothing. The 6th Corps did arrive, but it was too late so far as making an advance on the second line. The entire rebel army was on the alert, and the weight of it concentrated on this portion of the line. Lee was determined to retake the horseshoe, muleshoe. Hancock's determination was no less rigid. To extricate himself from the trap without a fearful loss of life while daylight lasted was not possible. And so for the entire day, the fiercest fighting waged. The oldest soldier has never witnessed its like. Lee's forces made charge after charge. Lines didn't give way, they melted away. The dead lay in heaps and others took protection behind them. Pandemonium swept right and left, and the earth was literally drenched in blood. Confederates sprang over the works and fought with the bayonet and clubbed musket till they were pinned to the earth. Federals hurled themselves over and pushed the lines back a few rods, but were soon swallowed up by the rebound. From daylight till dark, this terrible fighting went on without intermission. An attack was made on Lee's right and left, but he paid no attention, knowing they were only feints, and he didn't dare draw a man away from Hancock's front. Hancock sent Brooks's brigade to assist the 6th Corps when it was hard-pressed. It had just been served with 50 rounds of ammunition. It rushed to the front with a yell, and in 10 minutes lost 110 men. Who will say this is not carnage infernal? This is only a sample of the day's events, and nothing but the arrival of darkness prevented much more. When the fight waxed fiercest around the horseshoe, a section of artillery rushed up and unlimbered within pistol shot of the rebels. Before even the second shot was fired, 12 of the artillerists had been mowed down. In another 10 minutes, horses and men were so nearly wiped out that the cannon had to be drawn back by hand. All around that salient was a seething, bubbling, roaring hell of hate and murder. In that baleful glare, men didn't look like men. Some had lost or thrown away hats and coats. Some were gashed and cut and looked like tigers hunted to cover. Darkness alone brought an end to the carnage, and men who had scarce tasted food for 24 hours, or slept for twice that time, dropped to the ground. Sleep, the twin sister of death, could not be distinguished from him now, as they lay side by side on the wet, cold bosom of Mother Earth. Not wet with water alone. War is a leveler, like death. The best and the meanest blood here mingled. Then General Hancock, there is no greater. Yet today I made the amusing discovery that he has lice. It was with a species of profound rapture that this truth dawned upon me. While taking his lunch of hardtack and coffee this morning, he became quite animated. The cause of this was an insect, and an order for a search and seizure was immediately issued. It proved to be one of the largest specimens of louse flesh known to naturalists. For size, it was in keeping with the general's magnificent physique. If, as has been asserted, all flesh is grass, General Hancock may be said to be a load of hay. But these bloody precincts are not the place to indulge in seeming levity. This has been a most awful day, and if there has been any benefit commensurate with the loss of life and limbs, I cannot see it. This is all the comment I have to offer on this day's work. In the morning, we discovered that Lee's lines have been shortened and strengthened, leaving us in possession of the Angle and of more deed than we have ever seen. A large detail was sent out to bury them. A very disagreeable duty. After attending to our deed, we returned to our regiment. Our division was ordered to the left of the Angle and remained there till near nightfall, when we moved to the extreme right and threw up breastworks on the flank. We'd just completed them and thought we were safe for the night when we again moved to the left and passed the night. This moving from right to left and left to right must be what one writer has reference to when he speaks of Grant as raving up and down the line. Our force was strengthened tonight by the arrival of the Corcoran Legion. We were mighty glad to see them, although they were not ready for action till the priest had absolved them. Although I take no stock in this performance, under the circumstances it was quite impressive, and their chaplain came much nearer the front than most dare to. But I don't blame them much, for chaplains have no real business at the front in time of action. We were moved to the left and massed in rear of the 9th Corps, which was ordered to assault the rebel works. But soon we found we had changed ends, and if any charging were done, we would do it. The 9th Corps had been quietly removed, and we were now at the front, with skirmishers out. We waited in line of battle an hour or so, advancing a short distance without discovering the enemy. We soon called in our skirmishers and fell back to a quiet place and passed the day. We stood sorely in need of both quiet and rest, having been continually on the march and fight since the night of the 3rd of May. My endurance has been so outrageously taxed that I sometimes envy those who have laid down their lives. They sweetly sleep while we toil on. At night, our regiment was sent on picket, and after we went out, our division, Birney's, moved again. Mighty sure we are that General Hancock will never be accused of that masterly inactivity that has been charged to McClellan. We move so often that it is no easy matter to keep run of our command unless we stay with it every minute. It is suspected that the rebels are preparing a demonstration on some weak point in our line, or going to retire from here altogether. The losses on our side thus far are terrible beyond imagination. Our division left camp with 7,000 men, and we now are reduced to a skeleton of 2,500. Such decimation of our ranks and the fact that we are not more than 20 mils from our first encounter has had the most pernicious effect on morale. This has been an example of Grant's hammering generalship. That he does understand the flank business is abundantly attested, because he did flank the enemy at Mine Run. All he will gain will be by outwitting the enemy with flank maneuver. Then why all this slaughter? We're on picket all day and expected to remain there till we were set upon by rebellious subjects of Uncle Sam, bent on homicidal intent. We saw some of them hanging around as though desiring an introduction or something. If they came any nearer, we could promise them a cordial reception. Along toward night, we were relieved, just in time for other troops to tangle with our visitors. We had just reached our division inside the works when the Johnnies appeared on the ground, making hideous sounds as they came, this being considered a very important factor in rebel tactics. Our pickets fell back promptly and tried to draw them out, but they wouldn't come, except to the edge of the field in front of us, where they stood and grimaced and yelled like monkeys. Our situation today is somewhat peculiar. We are facing the same way as the Confederates were on the 12th, and they are now menacing us from the same direction from which we then threatened them. Having failed to get in here by frontal assaults, they are now trying to get in from the rear. But we have anticipated their designs and conformed our lines to this expected order of things. This must be the most valuable piece of real estate in Virginia, judging from the effort put forth to possess it. We passed the night in the rebel works, which are divided off into square pens for the better protection of the inmates. The 2nd and 6th Corps massed on the rebel flank, while the others moved off in a southerly direction. Here now was another flank movement, which compelled Mr. Rebel to get up and dust. Why this wasn't done some days ago is a problem whose solution I cannot undertake. So Spotsylvania is ours, and not by might, but by the simplest rule of warfare.